10 o'clock, gentlemen.
So,
All right.
welcome everybody that joined, and thank you for jumping in last minute. Apparently, most of you joined this a couple days ago, so we are thrilled to have you here. And y'all are in for an amazing talk. Are you the problem? I think most people would say normally I am. We'll
That
see how this
mustache
talk
for
goes.
sure is.
This mustache is magnificent. For those of y'all that missed it, it's a team building thing, so I'm very proud of it. We're blessed, cursed, and all the other things to have Michael Bosco and Kevin Keim. They're both facilitators in my peer group, dear friends of mine. Of course, Mr. Bosco was president prior to my being president, and Kevin was my Centricon rep. So he's been in and around the association and the industry ever since I've known him. It's going to be amazing. Y'all plug your ears in and get ready to get your worlds rocked.
Thank you, Jason.
I love
Pretty good little
that
introduction.
Very plain. Yeah. I mean, it's all downhill from here, apparently. Now
right.
that we've
But
set the stage.
I think we need Jason to stay on as background with that. Hope you don't go anywhere.
I think I'll set a screensaver for you.
Awesome.
Oh, we've got
Thank you,
screenshots.
Jason.
We're good. We can set our own.
Well, thank you, Tammy, as well, for getting this up and going and handle all the logistics on the back end. So I always appreciate TPCA and making this happen for members. I think it's such an incredible value, and looking forward to walking you guys through their talk today. So, Kevin, this is your show, and I'm here when you need me.
Isn't
that the way we're doing this?
Officially works. Yeah. No, this is you're more of the problem, which I don't know when Tammy put us on the live mic. So I'm not sure if everyone heard that, but Michael can be technologically challenged at times, and yesterday was one of those days that we had to assist him through this process. But we got him figured out.
True.
I do want to take a minute and let everyone or remind everybody that if you aren't familiar with us, Jason gave a great introduction as well. But Michael and I are, I guess, what did he say? Blessed and cursed to be able to support the Texas Pest Control Association with our partners at McFarlin, Stanford, and be able to help put on the business education talks for TPCA. By all means, if you have any questions after today's talk or anything else, or questions about McFarlin, Stanford, what we do, how we support the industry, by all means, these QR codes will get you our contact cards to where you can access information on the fly and be able to check in with us. Tammy, it is important to note that this is the correct headshot of Kevin, not the one that was used on Facebook. There's about 65 pounds of difference between the two. And so that's
AI.
myself. And not AI. This is a real headshot. For those of you who have ever heard me talk about AI and some of the presentations I've given,
I need you to send me a current headshot.
I will do that. I will make sure to do that. I had lots of family members commenting privately, thank God, not on the public TPCA talk about how that's not the right photo of you. I'm like, yeah, thanks for everybody for checking in on that.
Well, from my perspective, you still look good. So don't.
Thank you.
Bring it down.
We can go home now, everybody. So Michael posed this idea for this conversation, and this is, I feel, an appropriate one. Speaking of AI, Michael, I'm quite proud of you for generating an AI
Thank
photo.
you. Yes.
For this slide presentation. But the purpose of today's conversation is just identifying, as owners or leaders in your business, when is the appropriate time process to step back and take a look at, are you the problem? And are you the one that is potentially holding back your team, your company, from growing, from hitting the next level of growth, whatever that level may be, depending on your goals? But for those who don't know, Michael is the past president of Safe Haven Pest Control. I was the president of Innovative Pest Control. So we have likely both been problems. So we are uniquely qualified, I guess, to give this talk. But I think both of us also have over 13 plus years of experience, maybe been pretty good at holding each other accountable, of pointing out that we are a set of problems. And so I think that's kind of an important part to start off with this conversation and going through that. So, Michael, maybe if you want to give us a quick introduction to what you find as the hard truth and what challenges that you often see as we interact with business owners across the US.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. As running operations, you realize how many times you created the problem, um, and struggled with finding the way through it. And then now, as you and I facilitate peer groups, we have this interesting perspective to be able to go inside operations and interview team members. In fact, we got Chase Wortham on. So thank you, Chase, for joining us. He hosted down in Houston a couple weeks ago. And it takes a brave person to open up your operation and let 12 other business owners come in and see your operation. And interview your team. And when you do that, it exposes a lot of opportunities. We'll just call them opportunities, right? Um, but it really does come down to the leader of why one organization will sit at 800,000 or maybe even 1 million, or sometimes stall at 2 million, or whatever it is, versus truly wanting to reach their goal of, is it 4, is it 5 million? Frankly, it doesn't matter. If you want a $1 million operation, great. That's an incredible pest control business. For years I said, where Safe Haven sat, I'm happy. I really just wanted to maximize the profit, and that we were running a sound, sustainable company that was profitable and took care of our team members. It really wasn't about overall growth to me, but you still had situations that I had to overcome to get us to where we needed to be. And finding that self-awareness is hard. And how do you do that? And how do you become aware of the blind spots, right? The blind spots are blind spots because they're literally blind. You don't see them. You don't realize them. You don't know that they're there. And how in the world do you acknowledge or realize that that's the case? That's how do you know what you don't know?
Yep, yep. I think that's a really good point. So maybe the important part to start in this dialogue and this conversation is to start with recognizing, what is your overall goal? The way that Michael was describing, I maybe would put a word out there that says, if you want a lifestyle company, perfect. It fits your lifestyle, the needs that you want. That's great. Whether that's 1 million or 2 million or 3 million, that's part of it. I know, Michael, you were very comfortable at the time that growth where Safe Haven was and had been for a couple of years, and focused exactly what you said on the profitability that you had and what you enjoyed. Or do you want to grow? Either way, the reality still exists. Growth can be personal growth. It can be, like if you're at the revenue that you want to be at, you still have to evolve and change the company. And if your lifestyle, if you want to at that point just enjoy your lifestyle or where you are personally in your life, then you can still use this conversation today to realize the blind spots that are maybe preventing you from to lead into another talk that Michael and often you consistently give of how do you arrive at the 10-hour work week, right? How do you enjoy, kind of letting your team, empowering your team to run the organization through systems and processes. And I think that's overall our goal today, is to help you guys maybe take a minute to look at how you're tackling and approaching your company, and where you're finding those blind spots and managing from there.
Yep. Uh, so how do we end up there, right? I These are the things that we see of the leaders that kind of get stuck, or don't just see the opportunities. And micromanagement is a tough one. If you've been in this industry long enough, you've ran across Errol Cohen. He's back with Busy Bee and many companies. But Errol, when I was probably 17 years old, going to TPCA meetings, he gave me
Yeah,
some
the,
pretty
that big one, the corner
sage
post lines up
advice.
with the corner post on this one down there.
Jason, you're gonna have to mute, or Tammy, can you mute him? There we go. Thank you. I'm sure Jason's got some good information to
He's
share.
definitely the problem, by the way, but we're moving
Yes.
on.
So Arrow said he gave me the demonstration of climbing a ladder, and if you can't let go of one rung to grab the next rung, then you're never going to climb and never going to grow. And that visual, I work well with visuals, and that visual of truly having to let go to grab the next rung of responsibilities was a very strong leadership aha moment for me, that I just had, at a Dallas regional meeting of TPCA that has still today sticks with me. So micromanagement is a tough one. Ego over team, being needing to be the smartest person in the room. I'll tell you, in this industry, there are some people that I think struggle with this, but overall, I don't see this being the usual problem. I find the pest control industry specifically to be a very humble group of owners that really want to do right by their team and their customer. And I don't see the ego, but I could, in a with a drink or two and in a cigar bar, that there's a couple of people that I think struggle with this a little bit. We could discuss, but um, poor delegation, confusing tasks with responsibilities. This one comes up a lot, right? Kevin, you and I probably have a laundry
Yep,
list of
yep, yep.
situations.
It's the most common heard thing that we hear from all of our peer groups is that roles and responsibilities and who's doing what, when they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And I think you could take micromanagement and poor delegation and then the lack of accountability, which I know is the next bullet point. A lot of these throughout this conversation, you're going to think, oh, these are all really similar. And this is where that word growth comes back in, right? This personal growth of taking somebody who is pivoting from, if you were the founder of your company and you were the one running a route, to going and hiring that second technician. um, it's you gotta let off the reins. You have to trust your training process. You have to trust that that second technician is going to service to the same caliber or level that you have. And that's the first step in this micromanagement, right? And then how are you delegating what they're doing and how they're doing it, right? So this is all very uh, synergistic, if you want to use a very corporate term, I believe. But
Yeah, only
anyways,
took you two
it's part of
slides
that.
to get to the
I know, right?
synergistic. Yeah.
You're well. Yep. Yeah. It's probably a record.
Accountability. Accountabilities. If you have a little trigger in your brain, it's like, ooh, accountability. I hate that word. Either as one who gives accountability or is receiving accountability. Highly encourage you to go read Winning with Accountability. But accountability is like, I don't think you can get through a peer group without that word coming up, can you? Is that possible?
Well, not when the peer groups are named after accountability. It's kind of
Uh,
tough. Um,
well, that's
but
true.
yes, even from the context of the room, yes, we you really can't get through that particular conversation. And I do think, maybe to point out something, right? I think the reason why we put these back to back is that y- you can create your tasks, you can create the roles for your employees, you can delegate them to those employees. But if you just check that box and walk away, you're not going to have the success that you need to have, right? There has to be an element of accountability. One of the things we talked about um, with the peer group, when we were with Chase in Conroe last week, was specifically talking about like using, there's a difference between, having the person who's responsible and the person who's accountable for it, right? You can be responsible for creating a process or creating a responsibility, but then who's holding them accountable to following it, right? And those are important, I guess, important things to know the difference of, so that we understand what those are within your organization. So there's clarity.
Yep. It's important. And we could just have a whole hour on accountability. So,
Yep.
no systems. Um, this is really common. I think as operations get from 500,000 probably up to that 1 million mark, building those systems out is huge, and it never stops, right? And the systems actually tend to need to evolve and change as you grow too. But if you don't have systems, you are building no scalability within your business, and everything will tend to be a fire that needs to be put out. You're not getting ahead of the problem, and so no systems is huge. Um, and I would say this whole relying on hustle instead of process. I do think that, and particularly in our industry, um, a lot of hardworking people, and they feel like they can work their way through a problem versus building the systems out.
Mhm. So Kevin, great question about, can we expand on what a system is and what that constitutes? And I think there is a difference between a system and a process, although depending on the size of your company, that can be a bit of semantics, right? At the end of the day, a process is just you have a process of servicing the house every time, right? So I think what we mean, like if we want to be granular, systemization can be like when I worked at Corteva and we were talking about doing Centricon installations, right? You always installed the first station to the right of the front door, right? That's a system. And if you're looking for station one and you're scanning those barcodes, you always knew where that first station was. So that's a bit of a system where we've systematized to create efficiencies on the site. But if you want to take a step back, it could be as simple as, your truck layout, right? You have maybe you have two flow zones and one has a red painted lid and that's for repellents and one isn't. And every truck is set up the exact same way and they're in the same spot so that your inventory is easy to take care of. Your cleaning and organizing is easy. That's an example of a system. I start with these two examples because I think we commonly think of system and we think of CRM, we think of PestPack, we think of field routes, we think of this technology. Those are systems and they create and help systems, right? But truly, the system, and a perfect example would be, you know, how you operate communications could be a system. So I'll give an example. We would build our routes, and our goal was to communicate no later than 1 p.m. to our clients. We would drop notifications. Well, the system, there's a very formal system, right? We would internally communicate to the company, hey, we're going to drop notification. Why does that matter? Well, if they're working on a process or project or report, or they're at lunch, we need to know that. And then we can react so that when we hit the button inside of our software and it dropped the automated phone calls and the automated text messages, we were prepared to receive the inbound responses via phone or text, right? That's a system of what day, what time, how are we doing it, who's doing it. Those are systems to keep it scalable, right? As your company grows. And I
I
could go
can
on and on about that, but
appreciate the question coming from the engineer in the group too. So
yes, yes.
uh, I think Kevin, I think some good Kevin McKee. Um, I think some other real simple, as Kevin said, granular is talking about the fleet. Where do you hang the keys? Is there an organization to where the keys go? So if a key gets locked in a truck, or if something happens, somebody can't come into work, but you need to get into it. Are the key management system there? Is the numbering of trucks? Like, is there a system there that the number, like we were at a peer group a few weeks ago and their system of numbering their trucks was like really unique. They used, if the truck was bought in 2025, it was a 22.5, and then the if it was the first truck of the year that they bought, it was 251. And then the second truck was 252. So then next year, the first truck that they bought was 261, right? And I was like, that is so interesting and unique. I love it. Whereas we just randomly, like, the oldest truck in the fleet was 101. And I was like, anyway, just an interesting system that kind of helps answer and keep you organized. Safe Haven, we called it MLS, our minimum level of service, meaning that every time a technician went to a house, there was at least these protocols were followed, so that there was never that, hey, not never, oh, it happened, but it became a training issue, right? Of, did they sweep the house with the Webster? Then did they do the liquid than to do a dust in the weep holes, cracks and crevices, right? Minimum level of service was to deliver those 3 items on just the general pest control, right? And then maybe if there was granular that month, then there would be that. So these protocols have to be followed. So those systems, what we're talking about. Um, and then we can go down a rabbit hole of if you're using dynamic routing, then then it's really important for having minimal level service. If you have one tech, one route, same guy going to the same house every time, not quite as important, but that guy's going to get sick, right? And then what happens? The truck goes down, somebody needs to pick up the route. Are they going to be doing it differently? Delivery of service, right? Um, all right.
Or is that dedicated technician notating, on the account every time the unique things that he's doing for Mrs. Jones every time to where we're,
Mhm.
the oddities are being accomplished, right? And so
Yep.
that's part of the system of documenting service notes and updating account notes and stuff like that. So,
Then you get I love the way Kevin does it. You need to send Kevin back out here every single time. And then that blows up your whole dynamic routing opportunity. So,
yeah.
unless you're ready for the
Not that
hard
Michael and I are,
conversation.
yeah, not that Michael and I are biased towards that approach of routing, but yeah,
Yep, we are slightly biased. Um, Loyalty to a person or team that can't get you to the next level. This is a big one. I had the conversation a couple of weeks ago in Houston, possibly where you got some team members that have been around a long time, great team members. They've really, taken care of the company and company's taking care of them. But are those people in the right positions on the bus going to get you? They got you here. Are they going to get you there? So that loyalty, uh, and sometimes that loyalty is to a family member. Seen that many times in peer groups where that's a challenge. So again,
yep.
another hour long webinar right there, Kevin.
Yeah, correct. And I know that this is later in the examples, but I am living proof of arriving at innovative pest control because Tony understood and realized that what got him and the company where it is today wasn't likely going to get it to the next spot, right? And that's the principle of this conversation. Not that Tony was the problem. I think he was just self-aware of saying, like I my skills have gotten this so far, but I'm not the person to get it to the next level. And that's an important part of it. And I think that, quite frankly, leads perfectly into the next one, which is, around, how do we hire? How do we recruit? Is there a career path? I think
Mhm.
this goes back to another system, back to the systems thing, right? Because we live in and exist in a technical world. We live in a regulated world. There is checks and balance things that need to be done to onboard a technician, and to onboard, make sure the paperwork's submitted to the Texas Department of Agriculture, et cetera. And so, it's important that you have the resources, not only from a compliance perspective, which is where the system comes in, but then how are we onboarding and training for that MLS that Michael was talking about? But also, how are we culturally establishing, I don't want you to be, and I know that Jen Howard is on here, she'll giggle as this as a former Dow employee. We don't want people to feel like U411480, which was my old employee ID number. And so it's a you're setting up this process and creating the resources and onboarding that employee also takes a cultural element into this, right? And if you haven't established that, that's a part of, you might be part of the problem, right? That is in that process. And then most importantly, and again, Michael kind of alluded this at the beginning, I don't think this is as big of a deal in the pest control industry, especially now that I'm interacting with, the green industry. They're not as open as the pest control industry. So most people don't live in a box, or live in Amarillo like Jason does and only stay
Shots
in
fired.
Amarillo, right? But yeah, yeah, people in this industry are really good at getting on calls like this and expanding their mindset and learning new things, going to the pest expo, going to pest world. Those are examples of things that are doing it. But I do think it's incredibly important that if you are in your leadership team, but I take it a step further, like Michael, you had a library at Safe Haven where your technicians could read books. In fact, they did book reports, on those books, and those are all important parts of, learning those things, as the company, evolves and changes. So it's an important part of learning that, making sure that you don't just, I know everything, I got it figured out, right? And Kevin, I know you mentioned earlier, I want to bring it back, as the engineer, you'll appreciate this. The issue to solving systems is just a system. So yes, as a small business owner, it is hard to go do these things, or with a small team. So practice time blocking, block it on your calendar, and then build a system for you to go work on those roles and responsibilities, or that MLS that Michael talked about, and then go do it, whether it's you and one other technician or one or two others, right? The answer to the systems is the systems.
Well, I wonder if Kevin McKee was actually referring to the systems, or if he was referring to the loyalty with a
Ah,
small team.
yes,
So when
yes.
that
Might
comment
have, might
came
have read
through,
that wrong. Yeah.
well, either way, the loyalty, yeah, which 100%, Kevin, right? Like
Yeah.
in a small team like that, they're family, right? So, but it could be that loyalty. You're not doing the rest of the team, right? Like what's important to remember is that you're the coach, and that for your team to succeed, you need to make decisions that's best for the team and not for one individual. And so sometimes we really get too individualized with our decision making when there's 5 or 10 families that are relying on your decision making, not the one, right?
This comes back to, like, and I know this kind of leads into the empowering portion as we talk about that, but setting your cultural identity of your company, which most of the time starts as yourself, right? I was just talking with Chase about this, actually, this morning, about the 6 core values that Innovative Pest Control had. 4 of those core values were, if I reflected on it, they were Tony and they were Kelly, they were the owners, right? And I think that was an important part of the establishment of what the culture would be. It was important to Tony and Kelly that, as they had plans to grow the company, that family feel existed, and your core values do all of that. But I think by creating your core values, creating a vision, and creating the goals, communicating all of those things to your team, is how you solve part of the loyalty. I think it's also how you begin the process of empowering and transitioning a team, right? Because if you, I think the quote I told Chase was, "If you build Rome, they will come." Right. So, if you build these things, and you communicate these things, then you should have the confidence to know that really loyal employee will come along. But you also should have the confidence to know, if they don't, we've naturally arrived at a path that just fits, right? Where your vision for the company, where the company is going, if that employee isn't there, from a loyalty perspective, I know, hopefully, Kevin, that helps maybe answer a bit of that, but it's still very difficult. There's no easy way to cut that, right? That you lose a long-term employee company. But as an owner, you also have to recognize, and that's why we put it on that slide, loyalty can't be the thing that holds the company back. It isn't the number one priority, right? That should exist.
Yep, good stuff. Do I spend my time putting out fires or building systems? The best example I can give you around this is Sean, my COO at Safe Haven, ran our operations. He was the best firefighter. And in situations where decisions needed to be made and things needed to be done, and we needed to get technicians back out in the field, he was great at that. He was calm and collected and cool, and he handled the whole situation just with grace and love, and he just got it done, and he just did it very you know kind. Whereas every time a fire arose, I was pissed off that there was a fire. Right? I was like, why the hell are we in this situation? And then I would want to go upstream and try to solve this, build a system, like, but right then and there, right? Like, we're going to solve this today. Not the time, not the place.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm. Yep. Yep.
and my emotions would, I basically, close between anger and mad and like frustration and everything else, fires are an indication that you probably need systems. Not always, but um, that's
And then I took an approach that was not Sean or not Michael, but I jokingly it became known as the PM. You know, when are we going to PM on this? When are we going to post mortem on this? Right. So the fire is going to happen, and
mhm,
someone will go solve that problem. And then I was the one that would be like, this is a great topic for our next L10 meeting. How are we going to fix this to build the
mhm,
system? Recognizing, Michael, it probably shouldn't have been like, I don't need to put gas on the fire in the middle of the fire. But you know, it's a part of that. And I think that post mortem is where you recognize what went wrong. Where did the system break down if there was a system? But I also think that's where you'll see these. Are you taking important things in your business like your financial books, you know, any data points that you have? Like, are you using data or are you using your gut? Don't get me wrong, your gut is an important part of your, you know, your decision making process and will always be part of that process. But you should still be making a decision or an informed decision as much as possible, because that's, you know, how you make and build a successful business, right? And that's part of it. And Michael, I'm going to let you talk about the assumptions one because this comes from an awesome quote from one of our peer group members that we modified for these slides, but it's an important point to drive home.
are we jumping down to the assumptions one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the books, I guess you did mention the books and P&L and all that. All right. Just trying to follow along here. The assumptions, are my assumptions killing my business? Th- yeah, this comes up all the time, and we're all guilty of making assuming we know what we're spending on marketing, or what is our cost of acquisition, or uh, we know what our gross margin for a delivery of service. Take bed bugs as an example. Tends to be a high ticket item. You know, you might be billing anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500, maybe more on a bed bug. Wow, how are you not making money? Well, uh, we decided we were not making money at Safe Haven with bed bugs. Did not turn into reoccurring business. That client tended to be not our typical kind of client. So it would tend to a lot of times take us out of our normal service area. It was not that profitable. If we had callbacks, it was even that much more challenging. So do you know your numbers to where you're not making assumptions? So there's so many places in our business that these assumptions can truly be keeping you in a rut or keeping you from being profitable.
Right. Right. Um, and I think a key component of this, you know, to understand is the challenges that you face on a day to day, like Michael's point with the firefighting, right? It's difficult to take that step back and truly make a clear and informed decision. And I think that's where, you know, it's important to find that, you know, back to time blocking. If you could step aside for a minute and make an informed decision, or step out of your room. But I firmly believe in the physical space, right? When you're in your office and you're in the building and the phone is ringing, or maybe it's your truck, but you're in your truck and your, you know, mobile phone is going off, like you should create an environment for yourself where you can truly think, right? Go to Starbucks, put your phone in do not disturb for a bit, or put it in a focus mode if you using that feature, but just make some abilities to be able to solve the challenges you have with you know an informed decision that you can make. It's an
Yep.
important part of it.
Um,
So employees, Michael,
yep. Yep.
talk a bit how you empowered your employees at Safe Haven and prevented them from getting, you know, feeling trapped or burned out.
Well, you know, I think the worst thing you can do goes back to the micromanagement thing is give someone responsibilities. Responsibilities is more important than giving them tasks, right? Like you give them a responsibility around those tasks so that they can own that, and then give them the space to work through that without micromanaging them. Nobody wants someone over their shoulder. Oftentimes, that's what actually attracts a lot of technicians to our industry is that they get to go out, run a route, service clients, take care of the client, and really kind of feel like they're on their own, they're independent, business people taking care of their route. Um, and it's very empowering, right? Uh, you got to think about your CSRs. Are you giving them the same kind of empowerment? Or are you on top of them, checking their work or jumping ahead of them? We saw situations down at Chase's place where you had two individuals in the office. It was one responsibility was to check emails as an example, and yet the other individual would jump in and check the emails before they could get, okay, is it my responsibility or not? Like, okay, well, if you're going to do it, I'm not going to do it anymore. So all of a sudden now it's just like, all right, fine. So getting those lanes of responsibility are really important, but not stepping on people. But because you can really, how many times do you get stepped on, but you're like, all right, I'm I don't know if you want to call it being burned out or just annoyed or whatever it is, but that's how people just, you start losing them.
Right. Um, I feel like when we talk about this, and Michael, I'm going to use a couple of things that you mentioned there, right? You were talking about empowering, and I think that is when you were giving the example of the technician. I think that is some of the subtleties of this, right? Is like, are you communicating to your team? It's your route and it's your small business and you manage it that way. And I want you to take it right. I mean, like one of the subtle changes that we made at Innovative is they weren't technicians anymore. They were account managers, right? And that's an unusual term for them, but it was our way of like, hey, we want you to be empowered to go manage it, right? Every customer is an account. You're going to manage them. You're going to keep them happy as much as possible. You're going to follow the training processes that we have. But at the end of the day, you're going to, within reason, keep them happy and manage it. Show up on time. Communicate that you're coming. The expectations that we had, but to be able to create an environment where they could truly feel like it was their own.
Sounds like Kevin
And
did a little R&D on that, a little rip off and duplicate from the green
I
industry
did,
around account managers. So
I did, I
look,
did. Yeah,
look at
that's
you.
exactly right. That's exactly right. I did. You better believe I did. Right. Um, that's part of it.
Yeah,
But it is important part of it. And I think when you go back to the office for a minute, I'll give another example to this. Is the office is always where it's a little trickier, right? Because the technicians are a bit more systematized just in general, the nature of the services that we provide, the office, your CRM, right? These CRMs are designed to be incredibly flexible. That also means there's like 10 different ways to do a task inside that software. And so and that's okay, right? Because the way that Safe Haven did it is probably different than Innovative did it, and probably different than a lot of you on this call. That's completely fine. I think that's where you establish that minimum way of doing it, and make sure that the employees are doing it well, but then at the same time empower them, right? So I'll give an example around routing. We were dynamic routing as well. Well, our CRM gave us like 4 or 5 different ways to route. So we trained and onboarded and made sure it was a well-oiled machine, that the routes were built, we're hitting our KPIs, and then told our employees, like, if you have a way that you would prefer to route, that's great. You have the KPIs, right? We know the daily production goal that we want. We know the number of stops that we want. We know what time of the day we want the routes done, and we know when we're going to communicate the routes to our clients. Outside of that, if you're doing and hitting those KPIs and if you've got a way to do it, right? However you want to do it, whether that's from the map, from the job pool, don't care. Whatever's the most efficient way. And I think that's a good example in the office of like, we empower the employee, but empowerment comes after training. And so just as important to know that you've got to trust there, we know, and maybe more importantly, to Michael's point, you swim lanes are defined and communicated and KPIs were established. Then we can empower the employee to make a decision
well,
on their
the
own.
the book that we were reading this quarter with the peer group was "It's Your Ship," and the Navy has some really awesome, like res- restrictive, I guess, SOPs around things. But when an order came down, that captain was really good about understanding the why, so that then he gave his team the opportunity to figure out, like, okay, is there a better way to accomplish the mission, right? Which if you can do that in the Navy, I bet you can probably do it in your multi-million dollar pest control business.
Correct. Correct.
um
Michael, I will
Cre-
let you talk about the monkeys because for those
oh
of you who
yeah,
have
I
been
love
reading
the
this, they're
monkeys.
probably Because we
You
did
know,
kind of already hint at the are you creating a job for yourself or in a career, right?
hmm which we see a lot. That's really, really common. It's the creating a job for yourself. But the monkeys, I'll tell you, I mentioned earlier about Errol Cohen and the ladder and being a micromanager. And I tell you that visual again has just stuck with me. This one, the monkey, is an incredible visual. It's one that we do over and over at McFarlin Stanford in the peer groups. And we have a couple of incredible women that delivered this the monkey presentation. But in a nutshell, if you every time a team member, every time, most times a team member approaches you, they're coming to you with a problem that they would prefer not to have, and they prefer you to solve that problem, which you can see as a monkey. So when that team member comes walking up to you, just visualize they got a monkey on their back, and their only goal is to throw that monkey on your shoulder, and you walk away with the monkey. Well, and we are really good at business owners at solving problems and wanting to be the answer person and getting through it quickly so that we can go on and be productive, right? Like we're thinking about let's solve this so we can move on, and you do it very successfully every single time. Well, every time you do that, you are taking the monkey, and before long you have a whole office or truck full of monkeys that you are carrying and feeding for. And you did not empower your team. You took the monkey, you solved the problem. And they could honestly be very simple questions. They can be, hey, Kevin, the truck is, I got a tire that needs to be repaired, right? Like it keeps going flat. What do I do? Well, if you immediately just give them the answer, and that is the quickest way to solve it, you're not giving them like, do you want to keep answering that for if you have 10 technicians, you want to answer that 10 times? One, how often time, right? How many times a year does that happen, right? So I can go on and on about the monkey, Kevin. You're just gonna have to stop me about the monkeys. But
I did,
that
yeah.
visual is huge.
It,
It was a massive leadership shift for me the first time I understood what was happening there.
and look, the easiest thing to do is to answer the question right. It takes time and diligence, so it's the ounce of prevention's worth the pound of cure, right? If you spend that time asking the questions and getting your teams to empower and solve the problems on their own, then it's less work for you down the road because they're not coming back to you, right? And that's the whole. It is you can Google Harvard Business Review. Don't take the monkey. And you can read it. It's a short read. It's fantastic. It's also like 50 years old, I think, and
Ni
still,
well, it is 1970, like, 4
yeah,
or 5 or something,
yeah,
so I
yeah.
can testify, yeah.
It it's tried and true and works today just as it did back then, right? And so it's an important part of it. And Michael's great, but he's not Harvard, right? So sure we
Close to
can
it.
trust them. Yeah.
Just
No.
Ivy League, that's all.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, alright, so the framework, well, how are we making sure that we're doing the right things as owners? Um, this goes back to Kevin's point about empowering your team members and if they don't know where you're headed, then empowerment really is very difficult, right? Like they don't understand the why behind it all, right? Like, so vision, does my team know where we're going? And that can be, hey, we're going to be a $2 million company, but we're going to have an 18% net with a 65% gross margin. Okay, great. That's what do we need to do that to accomplish that? Hey, no, we want to be a $5 million company in 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. But that vision and putting the flag out on the horizon is such an important thing. Everybody wants to be part of a winning team. They want to know where they're going, and that's how you do it. And it doesn't get done enough. And even if some business owners think they've done it, they haven't communicated it well.
Yep. Dry erase boards, posters on the walls, whatever way you want to communicate that. I think it's a good part of it, right? In giving them the ability to do it. And I think what's also important about that is the why, is part of this. And we can get into the weeds, but I mean, this is part of like change management and making sure people understand if you don't have the vision, then any of the changes that you make, whether it's the systemization, whether it's you as the owner stepping out of the truck to help run the business, not not work in the business, those changes can feel very different to your employees than they do for you. And so that's where the vision comes in, right? And helping them understand it. And I think that communication is incredibly important along the way. And I think part of that vision helps people understand or empower. It feeds into the next one, right? So if you think back to, Michael, when you talked about Sean earlier, before you had merged with Markle, Sean and Crystal were in different roles. And I think by setting the vision and communicating, I think it's probably fair to say that they stepped up, and maybe it's like the cream rose to the top, which then allows you to realize where people need to go, right? To where you can get the right people into the right seat on the bus. And I think that's an important element to it. Would you agree with that philosophy?
Yeah, and I think one of the best ways you can do that actually is build out your organizational chart, for 3 years or 5 years, and show that there's blanks. This is what we will need. We will need an uh, so, operations manager in 3 years when we get to this certain size. That'll be a vacancy that will need to be filled by the people that are already on the chart, right? And so what you're really doing is you're setting the vision, you're letting them know where they're going, but you're showing them like these are the roles. And then, if you've done a good job with the career path, okay, well, as a technician, I'm making this much. If I move into a lead tech, I can do this. I can, they want opportunity, right? And it organizational future organizational build out is a really easy way to set the vision and to show your people um, that there's opportunity. And also you'll start to see, do I have this person in the right seat? It's it
Yep.
becomes pretty clear.
Yeah. Which leads us to data. And in hindsight, Michael, maybe we should have called this something different, because I think that there's two elements to this. There's one, it's analyzing and reviewing the data, but really, I think the principle that we both wanted you guys to take away, or you all to take away from this, is that when you look at all of the things that we have in front of us, the technology, the pieces of technology that we have, are we doing anything with them, and making sure, and do we know them? Are you the subject matter expert on that, right? So any of these CRMs have a bazillion reports in them, and that report may mean something different to other companies, and some people within a company will use different reports, but there should be a core set of reports that you are familiar with, that you run and look at frequently, that populate data into a scorecard or KPIs for you. And so I think the data is important, but most importantly, it's taking the time to know what those are, where to find them, and then putting yourself into a habit of running those reports consistently, and then communicating them, right? Whether you believe in open book management and you're completely open from a financial perspective, like a P&L perspective with your company, but at least letting them know the score, right? Michael talked about earlier, setting the vision. People want to be on a winning team. Well, if you don't have a scoreboard, you don't know if you're winning or losing. And so the important part of this is like, every week I updated an Excel spreadsheet that was published into our Microsoft Teams channel for the whole company to see where we were month to date on a revenues perspective, right? We had a revenue goal every month and we wanted to obtain that goal. And we all played a role in it, right? And I felt it was important for the company to see that and communicate that. And so example of holding myself accountable to posting the data, to running the report, to knowing where to go run that report. But I think also just like, once a quarter, maybe you sit down and you go look at the CRM and you look at, what is this report? I've never ran it. Maybe I should run it and play around with it. Does this give me something new and insightful, to help your company, in a way, and help your team?
Well, this goes back to the assumptions too, right? It's if you're not running on scorecards or running the reports, you're really running on assumptions, and that's a dangerous place to be. So data good, numbers good,
Yep.
good numbers.
Yep.
Yep.
Kevin,
Um,
Mickey, you had asked a great question there of like, how did I know if they were looking at it in Teams? Well, I didn't just post it in Teams. We still talked about it in our weekly service meetings. We still talked about it in our month end meeting. And we had, as Michael or anyone who knows me really personally, I love me a good dry erase board. And so I also love bundles, for those who know that about me. So we had a bundle board, right? So we contextualized it in different ways. It wasn't just about the revenue. It was, hey, this is how many of these recurring services that we have, the Advantage Plus, the Advantage Total, and we would, it would either go up or down, hopefully always up. And we had negative numbers if it went down and positive numbers if it went up and different colors, right? And so it was a way of visualizing. So it goes back to the accountability of don't just post it and then let it be, right? It's still a dialogue and it's still you sharing it with your team, and making sure people were aware of it and then celebrating the victory, man. I mean, that's the other thing. And we can get into a whole gamification of it, but we broke our teams into teams. The winning team got steaks and baked potatoes every month, and the losing team got a hot dog and baked potato or potato chips. And so we made it fun. And there was always other little games that we kind of ran all around, but they named their own teams and we scored them and we ranked them, and they just had a dang good time of the pride of it that was associated with it.
Processes the industry we're in, guys. It's pest
Oh,
control is such an incredible opportunity to build such a simple, repeatable system. It's one of the reasons why our industry has such high multiples, right? Because it's so scalable. And so take advantage of our industry in the sense that keep your business simple and repeatable, and you will grow faster. The more complications you create, the more service offerings, and are you really good at residential? Are you really good at commercial? Are you good at, are you creating monthly billing, reoccurring services? There are such incredible CRMs that manage that repeatability in our business that it really is such an opportunity to grow. So take advantage of it so that you can have that scalability. And with
100%.
scalability comes profitability, right?
Yep.
Um,
And less headaches, right? I mean, that's the whole
yeah,
point of this
yes.
the talk today, right? Is if you have a system in place and a well-oiled system, another way to think about it is, are you the stick that someone's thrown into the bicycle wheel, right? A well-oiled system is the gears that are moving along and humming along, whether you're there or not, right?
Oh, facing problems. I think for the most part, most people are pretty good about facing problems, but there are always the people challenges that we tend to just keep burying. But the crucial conversations, having the hard conversations, winning with accountability. There's a number of books that are really good about this. But if Kevin, I think the most common place where this happens is where someone will keep bringing up an employee and they keep having the same conversations over and over and over. And I think that it's almost like, okay, let's talk about so and so this week, and it almost becomes a
Mhm, mhm.
routine. Um, if you're talking about one of your team members multiple times, then it's probably time to make a change. They probably
And
It's probably good for
the
them as
challenge
well.
with this, yeah, right. And the challenge with this is that might be a family member, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Michael and I deal with
Yes.
this more than we would like to deal with it. Because I don't
Yeah.
want to have anyone in that situation where they gotta fire their brother, but this happens. And at some point that issue has to be addressed because it just becomes cancerous for the whole organization. And if you're feeling that this conversation is continually happening, it's happening in the hallways too, with your other employees.
Yeah. I would say maybe 20% of the time, Kevin.
Yep.
The reason why an organization is not growing is because there's a family member in a key position that is really inhibiting growth. So,
Yep.
um,
Yep. Yep.
but I was at a peer group in Nashville like 4 weeks ago, and mom became part of the organization, and we were like, holy smokes, need more mom in this organization. She's a rock star. So it goes, uh, family
It can
members do
go,
not
it can be
automatically mean a problem.
correct, correct. But I think, and to drive home our last point, is the core values, right? I mean, you should be hiring, and you should be firing to your core values, right? And so, like, if we're going to have that difficult conversation with those issues, your core values become your North Star in this process, right? And so, if you have a family member or a challenging employee, if you feel like they're not upholding one of your core values, then that's where the conversation starts, because it's the core of the company, and that's an important part of making sure that that's identified and communicated, right, to be able to understand kind of what that looks like. um, a couple of examples, and maybe we'll be brief here. I've talked a bit about innovative pest control at the beginning, so I kind of already buried the lead here, but recognizing that everyone has their limits, right? I mean, I think that's an important part of it. I know what I know, and I don't what I don't. And I think that's where you can lean on the industry, you can lean on peer groups, you can lean on hiring a really good qualified employee, to help navigate that. And I think that's the first thing to it, right? That um, Michael will laugh at this. I'm not a bug killer. I never was a bug killer, right? And I wasn't going to go run a route. That's not what my role was, right? There were people at Innovative who were good at that. And what they needed was somebody to come in and help strategically make changes and guide us through a change curve that was pretty steep, mainly because of me. But to be able to navigate through that particular process and go through that. And I think what also was part of that, maybe not so much with us, but loyalty was definitely a part of it that played into it. And I know, Michael, this is an example that you had, right? I mean, we had an employee who had been with Innovative for 26 years, but he wasn't going to be the type that was going to be a general manager, if you wanted to think about it that way, or the president of the company, right? Doesn't mean you aren't loyal to that employee, but it's just recognizing that you can put him in the seat, but it isn't the right seat for him. And recognizing that there's a part of it, right? Our former office manager was best friends with the owners, and there's that dynamic of they weren't going to fire their best friend, but she wasn't going to get us where we needed to go. And so that was a part of where hiring an outside person to come in and manage it was helpful, in that particular process. And then the
Yeah.
last part is
Yep.
my little
ABH.
acronym. Yeah. Anyone who's on this call, we hear this consistently. You're not good workers anymore. It's a generational thing, whatever it may be, whatever you want to chalk it up to. And we can all complain about it, or we can just embrace it. In reality, we're not experts. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a generational expert. It is what it is. What we can control is how we approach things, right? So ABH stands for always be hiring. I think the first thing we need to recognize is that when you hit a certain point, I personally think that number is 1.5 to 2 million, you are always going to be hiring employees, right? You've got growth, like you have new roles that have to be filled, you're going to have to hire for. And at that point, when you have systems and you have processes, you should be pretty quick to let go of employees that aren't performing, because you have a well-defined system, training process, onboarding process, whatever it may be. And so it makes it a little easier to let go of an employee that isn't a good cultural fit or isn't performing at the level that we need them to be. And letting go quickly means you're going to be hiring more people. And so it's a cultural shift, right? When you get to a point where you're not going to hold on to bad employees because you have these great systems in place, then you're going to have to always be hiring. And so that's an important part of it. I point this out because there are the to arc back to our are you the problem? The problem exists when you hold on to an employee because you don't want to have to go hire another one, because you don't want to have to onboard them because it's a lot of work, right? And that's why we pointed out here of like it's a challenge. We all know it. You got to work through it, to be able to kind of be part of that. Okay.
All
Michael,
right.
for the essence of time,
Yep.
I think we may want to be quick with this, but I encourage you all to take a screenshot of this so you can just reference back to it. But there are a lot of great ways that you as a leader can, look in the mirror and check your blind spots. Whether it's a friend in the industry that you consistently talk to, whether you join a peer group, just don't be an isolationist. There's a lot of people in this world who have solved problems that you're solving. It's easier just to go work with them. A term we use in McFarlin all the time is R&D, stands for rip off and duplicate. Don't reinvent the wheel. The wheel has been successful. We don't need to try to make them square just to be different. Let's stick to it, and go figure out how to make that in your company. Um, I think get uncomfortable. If you are okay with being comfortable, then quite frankly, that should be your indication that you have you don't necessarily have a business that you want to grow. You have a lifestyle business. That's completely fine. But you should just optimize that lifestyle business to be efficient. But you should also be uncomfortable with learning something new, learning different things, making changes in your company, that inhibit growth, within your company, right? We talked about this earlier. Time block, right? Set time aside to go learn something inside of your software, to learn, something in QuickBooks, to learn a sales technique or process, to go learn how to create a new marketing tactic, how to tie them all together. How does the information flow together? What's that software or that process look like? To be able, but you gotta have time to build that. And that means you should block it off on your schedule, right? And Michael, I'll let you talk about scorecards since I know you love them.
Scorecards, KPIs, recurring billing percentages, like find cancellation rate, production per tech, whatever everybody in your organization needs a scorecard. They would need to know, Kevin, it's amazing how many times we ask somebody at an organization, how do you know you're winning? Right? When you ask a technician, how do you know you had a good day? What about CSR? It's a little bit harder. How do you know it
Hmm.
was a good
Hmm.
day as a CSR? They need some key performance indicators, letting them know that they did a good job that day. So find ways to incorporate that. Delegation checklist. This one, I think I could probably spend the most time on. You, as the owner, as the manager of your operation, need to be doing the things that only you can do. If you are doing things that another team member can do, they should do it because there's too many things that are the heavy lift that nobody else in the organization can do. So get things off your responsibility list if if a team member can handle it, right? Do the work only you can do. Are you having one-on-ones with your team, with your listen more? Again, remember, this is all about looking for the blind spots. If you're only listening to yourself, you're not going to find the blind spots. Your team members will help you do that. But um, that's you got to listen, be a good listener, and they got to be willing to share. And then books. We read 4 books a year in peer groups. You probably need to be reading a good 8 books a year, frankly, I think, to stay. And some of these books are so short. Five Temptations of CEO, Great Game of Business, Change Your Question, Change Your Life, kind of, and Atomic Habits. These are all just really good books. Be a learner.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to drive us home in a closed statement, right? Perfect cue. You as the leader, leaders are learners, and learners are leaders. So it starts with you. Um, I think the first thing you should probably be looking at is, if your growth is stagnant, you're not seeing the growth, ask the questions, why not? I think why is a very powerful word. And then another great book is called Atomic Habits, but find one thing that you feel like you should be working on in the next week or two, or just spend some time and think about what it is, and one behavioral change that you can make in the next month, to be able to make that change. And then, to quote Atomic Habits, it takes 60 days to create a habit. So then whatever that change is, hold yourself accountable to making that change, for the next 60 days. You'll find that to be helpful. And then I'm going to take us back to the beginning here. If you've got any questions, please, by all means, reach out to us. Our cell phone numbers are listed, our email addresses. We welcome you to reach out, ask whatever questions. And we thank you all for being on time today. Sorry we were a little over, but we are quite passionate about the topic. And so that's a part of it.
Yep.
I am unmuting everybody, so if anyone wants to ask a question, they can.
That was a
Jason,
great
good to
talk.
have you back on. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption, guys.
You gave it to Terry, huh? Oh,
Yep.
Terry.
Well, yeah, we had an unknown technological ability away from the device, and we were able to unmute ourselves. So good for us. That was a great talk. I love the concept of the team knowing about positions that don't exist yet and opportunities as the company grows. How powerful is that?
We had an org chart for 2028 on the wall in our office. And it was clearly labeled that. It had the positions that we knew would exist at the revenue we wanted to be at in 2028. There was a lot of empty spots, but it showed where they were, right? For roles that didn't exist, right? We didn't have a service manager. We didn't have a CFO style role or controller, and all of those were on the board. A head CSR, these are all stuff that we didn't have, but they knew we wanted to have if we all worked together and pulled our weight.
Yep, that's fun. And if you haven't looked into peer groups, I'm not going to endorse anybody, but McFarlin Stanford is an amazing organization. Look around, be a part of a group, be more active in TPCA, make friends, get in committees. The more active you are with other members, with members of peer groups, the more impactful it's going to be for you, and frankly, the more impactful you'll be for everybody else.
Yep.
So thank you guys so much. This is fantastic.
Yep. Thank you all.
Jason.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, just unmute yourself real quick before we end everything.
Kevin McKee, we appreciate your questions along the way, and thanks for your feedback. You're right. As we head into 2026, this is a good time to have some introspective on ourselves as well as the team. So do your year-end planning. I would highly suggest you get it on the calendar. This is a great time for you to set a date, for you to get away from the office with your leadership team. That could be just you. It could be two of you, could be three of you. But either way, get out of the office, plan a day where you guys can just talk about what the next year is going to look like. What did you do right for 25? What did you do wrong for 25? How are we going to repeat that? Where are we going? What's the point on the horizon that we want to end 2026 at? So plan it now. If you don't put it on the calendar, it ain't happening.
Time slips by so quick. Yep.
All right, everybody.
Well,
thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
We'll see y'all later.
Thanks,
We'll
Tammy.
see you
Tammy?
soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
guys. Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Put on
Y'all
another
have a
great
day.
event. All right. You too.
Bye, guys.
Adios.